Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the Blue Line Blast podcast. I'm your host, Jim Biringer, alongside my co-host, Matthew Blittner. We're back again. The Stanley Cup playoffs rolling on. A couple of series in the books. Matt, what's going on, buddy?
Not much, Jim. As you said, a total series in the books. Colorado's going to have probably 7-8 days off. Carolina's going to have probably about 6-7 days off. Edmonton might be out.
They might be joining them.
Yeah, they might be out in the first round, and Connor McDavid's probably going to be saying to himself, why the heck did I sign here for 2 additional years? Minnesota and Dallas continue to thrill, as we knew they would. Montreal and Tampa is the talk to the playoff world. Buffalo really handed it to Boston in a way that I don't think many people saw coming.
We didn't see something. We haven't seen anything like that in Boston since like the 1770s.
Yeah, 1776 right there.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what happens. Which series did I forget? Philadelphia taking the 3-1 lead on Pittsburgh. 3-0 lead, and then it was 3-1. And then, of course, which series am I forgetting? The Vegas Utah series has been very
entertaining, very entertaining.
But Jim, I think the series that everyone's talking about at the moment, that is what we need to talk about at least quickly before our guest shows up. Anaheim, Edmonton. Jim, was it a damn goal or not?
All right, here's the thing. To me, it was a goal. You look at it, it's definitely in the net. I know common sense says it's in the net. I know the rule book doesn't say common sense. But if you're there, you got it right. And most of the hockey world is saying they got it right, except the people in Edmonton. I think more people are mad about the process and not the end result. But again, I will say this till the day that I make it to the other side. My uncle said it. I agree with him. If you're blaming the officials, that means you weren't good enough to win. Edmonton has not been good enough to win in this series. The young Ducks are flying over the seasoned pro Oilers.
Absolutely, Jim. And I happen to agree with you. I do think it was a goal. And we're going to get into that later in the show with, I guess, David Dwork from the Hockey News, who is coming back to join us as a repeat guest. But, I mean, Edmonton hasn't been complaining as much as you might think that they might on that. Like, Knobloch really didn't complain too much on that. He sort of sounded resigned to it, knowing that they'd screwed up and let in the goal. They sort of knew that the only way it wasn't going to be a goal was for it to come down via technicality of not having clear and convincing evidence. But that's the way the puck goes sometimes. Again, Edmonton is getting rolled over by young, speedy team. Is Anaheim going to make noise and go all the way to the Western Final? Probably not. But at this point, again, and Connor McDavid has not had a great series. Evan Bouchard has not had a great series. There's some rumor that McDavid is playing on a bad ankle. But he's got to be kicking himself, being like, I could have be a few weeks away from being a free agent and gone and signed a deal with the cap going up that, every team would have been throwing their checkbook at me and gone to a real cup contender instead of the papier-mâché cup contender that Edmonton's become.
The issue with Edmonton is, and before we get to our guest, is Edmonton is not as good as they were 2 years ago. They're not as good as they were last year. They don't have the depth. It's a one-line team. And their goaltending, again, continues to be an issue. They can't play defense. And the power play, which we thought was always their, bread and butter over the last couple of playoff runs, where it's like, don't put the Oilers on a power play. Well, it's now don't put the Ducks on the power play, because it's 2 power play goals down 2-0 that allow the Ducks back into this game. And it's it's the reason why they're up 3-1. The Edmonton Oilers just can't do anything against that Ducks power play.
No, they can't. And I mean, even, throughout, 5-on-5, everything. I mean, you have guys like Gauthier, you have guys like Terry, you have McTavish, you have these guys who are all showing up and showing out, and no one, except for maybe Leon Draisaitl, who looks good, no one's doing that on Edmonton.
No. Not even close. It's not even close. And when you don't have Jason Dickinson or Kasperi Kapanen scoring goals in game one, both had 2 goals, maybe the Ducks have swept this series. I mean, let's just be honest. Like, they played really well after rallying in that game. They're the better team. They've been the better team. Edmonton is just, they've run out of gas. Like, they just don't have, like, oh, yeah, everybody's like, oh, well, the Oilers have done it before. Not this version of the Oilers. They won 3 games once this year. If this was last year or the year before, I'd be like, yeah, sure, they can do it. Because they've rattled off 15 straight. Nope, not this team.
Nope, not this team indeed. And Jim, on that note, I think let's go to our guest, Dave Dwork from the Hockey News. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back after a word from our non-existent sponsor break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, from our non-existent sponsor break. I'm Matthew Blittner, that's Jim Biringer, and we're joined now by another returning guest, friend of the show, Dave Dwork from the Hockey News, all the way down in the Sunshine State. Dave, how you doing tonight?
Oh, well, better now that I'm with you and Jim, Matt.
Well, always great to have you here, Dave. I don't think any of us anticipated being where we're at. You were anticipating a playoff trip with the Panthers. We were anticipating a playoff trip with the Devils. So let's get started here a little bit. Panthers obviously miss. Injuries were a big factor. Why? Give us your summation on what happened to the Panthers and can they course correct quickly?
I mean, to answer in the wrong order, I think they can course correct quickly just because I think this season can absolutely be chalked up to just a whole horde of injuries just kind of stacking up on the Panthers as the year went on. It started with Matthew Tkachuk starting the season after having surgery, after going through the final. And he got hurt, what was it, like 4 Nations last year, played through it. So he had the surgery in the offseason. Thomas Nosek tore up his knee during the offseason. So right off the bat, 2 guys that were expected to be mainstay forwards are out for months on end. Sasha Barkov tears up his knee in the first practice that he was on the ice during training camp, and it just continued to snowball from there as guys were out of the lineup throughout the year. I think when they did a decent job during the regular season and kind of keeping their heads somewhat above water, and the playoff line as the year went on. But I think once they started losing defensemen, when you saw Seth Jones go out with an extended injury, we saw that happen at the Winter Classic, Jim, and just kind of from there, Kulikov was already out. Ekblad missed a little bit of time, and it was just seemed like everything that could go wrong injury-wise for the Panthers did go wrong this year. And look, law of averages, I get it. The Panthers were horrible basically for 3 decades. Now they got 3 straight Cup finals, 2 straight Stanley Cup wins. This year kind of made sense as a one-off. I get it. But for getting back to your question, I think that as long as the injuries are done and you don't have any catastrophic injuries between now and next season and everybody heals up and is properly ready to go, which is the expectation at this moment, then I would expect the Panthers to get right back on that same train that they were on prior to all the injuries and be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference competing for Stanley Cups. They're running back that entire core. Nobody's gone. And now they're going to have a little bit more money to work with. We'll see how, I know the big question, as I say, nobody's gone yet. And I'm sure we'll get to the goaltending at some point, but just big picture wise, between the core being intact and Bill Zito having money to spend, I do think that this season is just going to be a one-off for the Panthers and that they're going to get right back to work as being the team that everybody hates and that competes for a Stanley Cup for the next few years.
Well, you know what? Let's just rip the Band-Aid off then, since we're going to go right to goaltending since you brought it up. The big question is, will Sergei Bobrovsky be back, David?
That is the big question, and right now it's hanging over the team like one of those question boxes at Super Mario Brothers. Somebody's gonna have to jump up and punch it, and we're gonna figure out what's going on.
That's a great analogy, by the way. That's a great analogy. But real quick, before going there, it seemed like going to the trade deadline, there was a lot of chatter. Oh, he's gone. Once they kind of lost to New Jersey, but Bob comes out and says he wants to stay. Bill Zito kind of makes the marks. He's like, yeah, we want to keep it. And the players are like, well, we need him. So where does the contract land?
Well, I think it puts Bob and his agent in a very advantageous position at this point, considering all of his teammates have kind of come to bat for him over the last couple of months, whether between the trade deadline and the end of the season, saying, no, we need Bob back. Bob is our guy. He's our backbone. Like, they all totally believe in Bob. So it doesn't surprise me to hear that, the first negotiations of the offseason are going with Bob and his agent kind of taking a bit of a hard line with a big number. I believe it was reported that they're talking in like the $8 million range right now, which seems somewhat high for a goaltender that's going to be 38 years old on opening night, albeit one that's won 2 of the last 3 Stanley Cups and been pretty spectacular in the playoffs in each of his last 3 appearances. 4, if you go back the year before they made on that run to the first final when they won their first playoff series, and he was just spectacular against the Washington Capitals. No, I think big picture wise, everybody wants Bob to be in South Florida. All the players, Bob himself, his family, the front office. It's just it would work out very well for him to stay here. Now they're going to have to get on the same page in terms of finance and term. It would surprise me to my core, being that Bob is such a team first guy. His teammates are all raving about him. It would surprise me to my core if Bob did not fall in line with everybody else on that core that took a team friendly deal. And you can go down the list. Everybody's got a team-friendly deal that's signed recently with Reinhart, Bennett, Forsling, Ekblad, Marchand, all the guys that signed last summer. And the last couple of years, they've all taken friendly deals. Why would Bob not do the same? The goal with everybody in that locker room is to make it so they can be as good as possible, help them out on the back end of the roster with those extra couple million. And look at that depth has been such a huge key for them when they've gone on these runs. So I think if I had to look into my crystal ball, I would expect that Bob and the Panthers are going to come to terms at some point. They're going to find some middle ground in those negotiations. It's still April right now. They've got a ways to go. So it doesn't surprise me to hear that they're playing the game, because that's what you're supposed to do. But I will be surprised if we're 2 months from now, we get around July 1st and they're not closer to the same page. That will surprise me a bit.
All right, so Dave, I'm going to pity back off that a little bit, and I'm going to ask you to peer into that crystal ball a little bit deeper. We know that there are different tracks that teams can take with their players, especially with their goaltenders, and as you mentioned, Bob is getting up there in age. I don't think they're going to go with a high average annual because, as you said, it would be team friendly. You expect him to fall in line with being team friendly. But if he's not going to go high average annual, that would suggest to me that the Panthers would do what the Devils did with Jake Allen and spread it out over term. That way the average annual comes down. What are you expecting the term to potentially be? Because, they have a lot of contracts already into the early part of next decade. I mean, they don't want to hamstring themselves too much.
No, and you also have to take his age into account. I mentioned before, he's going to be 38 at opening night. Goalies traditionally are done at this point in their age. There's, maybe a couple every generation that play into their late 30s, early 40s, but they are few and far between. So right off the bat, you have to kind of take that into mind. But I think with Bob, the term may not be as big of a deal. Like you look at like the Brad Marchand deal, for example, they gave him a deal that's going to expire when he's 43 years old. Is he still going to be playing when he's 43 years old? Probably not. Probably not going to be playing for a couple of years at that point. But whether he retires and the deal just goes away, or if, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, for Bob, let's say they give him like a 6-year deal to average to get the term lower, right? I don't see how that benefit, just because it's not like he's going to make that money in the back end if he retires. If Florida buys him out, maybe it's a lower term, and over the course of a buyout, you cut that in half. But I'm sure that's not something that they really want to consider in terms of like when they're coming up with the deal. But something that would make sense for Bob, I would think, for me, 3 years would be like my max for a guy that, let him play into his 40s, and the 5, 6. I mean, the cap's going up, so, and I know he's going to want more, but again, like team friendly coming to mind, and also take into account that the Panthers, when they, even the last few years, they look at him as a guy that's starting around 50 games a year. So that's not like your workhorse starter that you're going to put all that money in the bank for. And it's also, you're going to have to put in some for another guy who's going to play, depending on Bob, talking about 30, 40 games now, if Bob takes a step back. So there's so many different variables and balls in the air when you're talking about this situation with Sergei Bobrovsky, that really any one thing not happening the way it should, whether it's Bob deciding, no, I want more term, or Bob deciding he wants more money, or the Panthers deciding that they want to try to maybe go after a bigger shark. We've heard names like Jesper Wallsted's one that they talked about in a trade, but now we're talking about Connor Hellebuck maybe being available out of Wisconsin. Man, I am on one right now. Out of Winnipeg, or Jordan Binnington being available out of St. Louis. So there's just so many variables right now that I think at the end of the day, knowing that Bob wants to get something done to stay in South Florida and the Panthers want to get something done to keep him here, it just wouldn't make sense to me to see that not happen. Just taking everything else into account and then remembering, oh yeah, by the way, this is also a team that's probably going to be competing for the next several Stanley Cups, maybe a place somebody would want to be. Also, maybe the most fun locker room, that's been the envy of the league, just with the camaraderie that they built in South Florida. So just so many reasons why I'd be shocked to see them not get it done.
Yeah, same here. I kind of be shocked by it because it's like it just feels like he's perfect for that team. He went there in 2019, but you mentioned Hellebuck, Binnington, potentially they go someplace else. But I think we also have to factor in this playoff salary cap too, because if you're bringing in Bob at 7, say he comes in at 6, right? Are you bringing in another guy at 6? Are you bringing somebody else in at less? Are they bringing Daniil Tarasov back? Like, there's other factors in this because you're going to have to set your playoff cap up too moving forward, right?
No, for sure. And that's the thing. Like, are they going to go for one of those? Do those big names entice Bill Zito? And if that's being the case, then how do you fit whether it's, Hellebuck, Binnington, somebody of that caliber, and a Bobrovsky, get them all in, for somehow you're going to get somebody like that playing under both of them playing the 82 games. How much are you going to be paying them? Because when they had Spencer Knight here and they gave him his bridge deal, that was I think it was around $5 million. So right there, you've had $15 million tied into 2 goaltenders for, I think, about 2.5 seasons or whatever it was until the Spencer Knight trade to Chicago last year. So it's a situation that I think they were almost glad to get out of. And now, are you going to put yourself right back into a situation like that where you're tying up 13, 14, 15 million into 2 goaltenders? And granted, again, it's a rising cap situation. It's going up a substantial amount over the next 2 years, and it should hopefully continue. But still, there's just so many different variables that you have to take into account. I'm very curious to see how it plays out because, as you guys know, I'm a goalie, so I get a little geeked up about goaltending in general. So I want to see kind of what happens with Florida, because one thing that one thing that I think Panthers fans or hockey fans just paying attention can count on at this point is that the Panthers goaltending excellence department that they created 5 years ago at this point now, they continue to find guys, whether it's bargain guys. You remember it was Luongo that found Alex Lyon the year before anybody was picking him up. They had Brandon Bussey last year that, he ended up getting plucked off the waiver wire by Carolina, but it was Florida that signed him in the offseason. Guys that they've signed to back up Bob the last few years, whether it's Tarasov, Vanacek last year, Stolarz a few years ago. These are all guys that have played really well in Florida systems. So you have to be confident that whatever goaltending they target, it's probably going to work out as long as Florida plays the way they're supposed to in front of the goaltenders, which up until last year's injury season had not been a problem.
So it sounds a little bit, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're bucking for the job to be the new goaltender for the Panthers. At least it's Bob's 1B type. He gets 42 games. You get 42 games in the new 84-game season. But also, because I know probably what you're going to say about that. One way to help with the salary cap, obviously, is to bring in cheap guys, as you were mentioning. Panthers have a high draft pick. That's someone on a minimum contract that could help. So what's your thoughts on what they do?
Oof, that's an interesting thought. Right now, we don't know. They're either going to pick 1st, 2nd, 8th, 9th, or 10th. That's what we know. They're going to have one of those 5 picks, depending how the lottery plays out. Now, if they end up 1st or 2nd, I think the goal going into the draft is you get something out of it that can help you immediately because you are competing for the cup right now. So playing for a future, I mean, granted, it's not a bad play, but this team is right in win now mode, maybe more than anybody at any time in their history. So I think the goal would be to take that high end prospect, that high end future, and turn it into something that can help them now. If that ends up being a top 2 pick, obviously one of those top 2 guys that we're talking about can help the Panthers right away. I mean, Gavin McKenna is ridiculous, but if it ends up in that 8, 9, 10 range, my thought at this moment is you go into that looking, okay, who's looking to move up? Who's looking to move into the first round? Who's got something that I can extract that's going to help my team right now? It's just they're too set up right now not to have that kind of a mindset. So the idea of taking a goaltender, I think probably not, because that's maybe the most what needs the most gardening of somebody that you're going to draft. It's going to be, goalie, defenseman, forward. And if you get a decent enough defenseman, it's becoming a lot easier, I think, than it was 10, 15 years ago to develop defensemen into the NHL, just in terms of the time that it takes. But with goalies, for whatever reason, it just takes a minute. Like they need to rack up those minutes. They need to get those reps. And for Florida, I think, also going back to what I said before about the goaltending excellence department, I think that they feel pretty good about picking out goaltending talent wherever they can. So right now, it would not make sense to me for them to do anything other than something that's going to help the team immediately with this pick that kind of fell into their lap. Because when they made that trade with Chicago at the 2025 trade deadline, it was almost like a throwaway thought, like, oh yeah, top 10 protected, whatever. The Panther, lottery pick, this team, what are we talking about? And, 10 million injuries later, oh yeah, it kind of worked out for the Panthers anyway. So it's almost like they're getting a little bit of house money to play with right now, and I think that they're going to use it to help them in the immediate.
Well, and it's weird you mentioned that. It's like, but when the trade went down, actually, it was at the state. It was right before the trade deadline, because it was at the Stadium Series in Columbus. Everybody was on their phones, like right before puck drop. We're like, Seth Jones went where? and it was like, wait, he went to Florida? But at the time, no one knew outside of like a handful of people that it was a top 10 protected pick. Like we just found out about it now. And you mentioned that, but what other besides the draft pick? Because we'll see what happens with it. What did you get your sense listening to Bill Zito towards the at his year-end press conference after they missed the playoffs, obviously with the injuries? And again, this started like at the beginning of the year, like you said. And I remember Kulikov going down in game 2, and I'm like, here we go again with the injuries. Their depth's going to be tested. Where do you think their biggest need is going into this season?
Health. I mean,
besides health.
The depth forwards are always going to be key. AJ Greer, he's going to be UFA. I think, you're looking at guys like Evan Rodriguez as somebody who's going to be going into the last year of his deal. I think Bill Zito ultimately, like, that depth is so important. And they're at this point, when you look at the guys that are locked up beyond next year, but for the next several years, it's almost top heavy when, Barkov, Tkachuk, Verhage, Bennett, Reinhart, so on and so, the defensemen, Forsling, Ekblad, Jones, they're all signed up. So you don't really need to make any huge swings. Now, if Zito can go out and make something happen, which he finds a way to seemingly every year, it seems like when they go on a run. But no, right now, I think just fortifying that depth, making sure that everybody's healthy. And I mean, we talked about it, but shoring up goaltending, whatever they end up doing there, that's going to be a big thing. But I think at this point, guys, it's like with the Miami Heat down here and Pat Riley, like you just trust. And not, I know right now, if there's any Heat fans paying attention, it's a little shaky on that ground, just because the Heat have not won a championship in a few years. And oh my God, but just to my point where Bill Zito, no reason not to trust him. Carte blanche at this point. Whatever him and his staff that he's built up is going to do, you have to trust. And I mean, just look at the landscape around the league right now. They're starting to pluck guys out of Florida's front office. You're hearing this guy is going to be in for this job, and then this guy gets Sonny Meta in New Jersey. It's just I gotta trust Bill Zito. But to answer your question, now that I'm kind of wrapping my head around it, I mean the biggest question mark is going to be goaltending. But other than that, the biggest need I think is just shoring up that depth, because really it's not like they need any high end scoring. It's not like they need any big minute defensemen. They're good as long as they're healthy. They're going to be okay. So yeah, depth.
All right, so. Dave, you've been, we've constantly been dancing around well, Florida just needs this, and they're going to get right back to where they were competing for a cup. They have this, it's just, this was an off year type of thing. It's been the theme of our whole conversation so far. So I'm going to ask you, what have you thought of the playoffs so far this year? I mean, we have 2 series that have wrapped already. Carolina obviously swept Ottawa. Colorado swept Los Angeles. Big shocker there. And we've had some pretty interesting series. I mean, Edmonton's down 3-1. I don't think anyone thought that Philadelphia was going to take a 3-0 lead on Pittsburgh. Tampa and Montreal, it's been overtime after overtime after overtime. Just what's your take on the playoffs going around the league?
I mean, they're the best. The Stanley Cup playoffs are just the best. Like no matter what, you're always going to be entertained. And this year it's been great. I think I was maybe most surprised so far by, I guess, the egg that Ottawa laid against Carolina. I mean, no disrespect to Carolina because they've been doing it year in and year out, but I just thought that was going to be a much more competitive series. I thought Ottawa, they played gritty. They played with heart. They had a lot of young talent. So that was kind of a surprise to me. I think the Dallas-Minnesota series has been just spectacular. Every game, I've just been super entertained. Entertainment value-wise, the Ducks-Oilers series has been really fun. Tons of goals. You know what? I'm going to cut myself off here, and I'm going to ask you guys a question because now you just wonder, like, what did you think of that goal last night in Anaheim? Like that we never actually saw go over the goal line, but it's a goal, and I mean, it's like my wife is asking me about it, so I know that it's gotten like to reaches that it doesn't necessarily get to. So I'm curious, what did you guys think?
Jim, you want to take that first?
Yeah, so I've looked at this a million times, and I looked at it this morning with some tired eyes because I traveled from Montreal on Monday morning because I was up for games 3 and 4 in Montreal for Tampa. Nice. and the Canadians, and you get up there for a playoff game. It's a religious experience. I just take the pilgrimage. It's worth it. But I've watched it over and over again, and I say to myself, it's a goal. Referee eye, it's a goal. Now, in the playoffs, all goals are reviewed in overtime. So they could have called it no goal, and it could have gone to the situation room because they definitely would have buzzed down on this. For sure, it's that close. Now, there's two sides of this. With that being said, the call on the ice was goal. I don't know. The officials were not in position, so I don't know how they got to that conclusion. But anyway, however, if you look at the video and you look at the puck and the circumference of the puck and you just look at the shape, I looked at it as a clock. At my 10 and 11 and my 1 and 2, I see white in between the puck and the goal line. So I'm like, I don't care what the top shows me. That puck's over the line, and it's a goal. The call on the ice is the call that they got from the situation room is 100% right. It's just getting there that I think there's a lot of confusion and controversy.
Yeah. So to tap on, I also feel the puck was in from the front out view. I thought it was a goal. I didn't think that the save was made. And then obviously looking at it from overhead, yeah, as Jim said, you can see the white on the side. So, it's got to be in. But it reminded me, the controversy around it reminded me of the conversation that I had with one of the league's vice presidents of innovation a couple weeks ago, Sean Williams. And this is actually one of the things that the league is currently working on in regards to their new innovation lab that they just opened at Prudential Center. They are working on the puck tracking technology so that an issue like this, and I swear it's like foresight on his part to have brought up a situation like this a couple weeks ago when he and I had the conversation. It's literally, they're working on it so that this situation can be done like that. Because realistically, if you can set up, maybe not a goal line camera, because that's still going to probably get blocked conceivably by maybe not the skate, but by the goalie mitt, depending on, like when sometimes the goalies go back.
Yeah, something's going to be on the post.
Save. But if you can use like the laser technology that the league is currently looking at to, maybe put it where it's 3 inches back in the net, 4 inches back in the net, whatever, the depth you want to put it. And it can sense, okay, well, the puck has come through and fully come through. It'll take away the mystery. So it doesn't matter if you don't have the bird's eye view, if the skate is covering it or anything like that. If you can just implement that technology and, they're still working through the kinks of it, it'll take away situations like this all the time because you'll know instantly, okay, it's in or it's not.
I'm just picturing like what they've got going in MLB right now, which is awesome with the pitch tracking. Like I'm just picturing like a goalie, like the puck, he's like, no, review, ref.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up. I used to work at MLB Network. The issue with the ABS system, though, right now, and I'm sure that you've seen it because, you do pay attention to baseball. The ABS is not 100% accurate and infallible. And they've said it, Major League Baseball. It is one of those things where right now it can be off by as much as 2 to 3/10 of an inch. So you literally have calls that are being made that are potentially overturning calls where they're like, oh, well, the ball is on the line of the strike zone, but they've even admitted it could be off by as much as 0.3 of an inch. 0.3 of an inch is not insignificant. If the ball is on the line, if the edge of the ball is on the line of the strike zone, it could be 0.3 of an inch away, meaning it would be a ball, but you're calling it a strike because you're saying, oh, well, it's touching the line. So it's not infallible on that. But getting back to the lead VP over at the NHL, they were talking about how they're implementing the Hawkeye tracking system and the Sony tracking system that Major League Baseball uses. Of course, it's going to be a little bit different because, the game of hockey is so much faster. And, baseball, you're just sort of tracking to see, well, how far did the ball go when it was hit? Like, you're not really concerned with, did it cross a certain line or not? So there are things that have to change, but they are looking at that technology.
Yeah, they'll get there.
They'll get there. I mean, it was just, of course, like all this, you knew eventually like a replay, because we've seen it with the offsides and the Jordan Staal play in that first game, like the overtime game with Carolina. Was it possession? Is it a judgment call? And now we're getting into this, and all Flames fans back in 2004, like, yeah, it was a goal, buddy. Like, they won the Stanley Cup in overtime.
I think it was a goal.
I think it was. I think Martin Jelena scored too. But again, we don't. We can't go back. But I still agree it was a goal. Real quick before we wrap this up, gotta ask you, because everybody, I've been watching this series tightly with Tampa and Montreal, and Tampa's playing this bully hockey that Florida kind of made them do, and they kind of did it before Florida did it. However, they're taking it to another line where at times it kind of throws their own game off, because Florida does it in between the whistles. Tampa feels like they do it more after the whistles.
Florida has somehow perfected that, like what the Flyers of like the 70s had perfected in their day and age, which was just playing that, like towing the line without looking like you're towing the line and somehow pissing everybody off. Like they're just so good at it. And the Tampa games that just, they hate each other so much at this point. And it actually happens when Florida like plays Ottawa a little bit more the last few times. Like they've gotten really into it. But yeah, I mean, to your point, they don't really go looking for it. It's just the style that they play is so heavy that they're on you all the time. So it's very tight. It feels like the ice is a lot smaller, and then whether they take liberties here or there, it always seems to bubble up during the playoffs. I don't know. Because when I'm watching Tampa, I'm not thinking that that's Florida. Like,
no, that's what I'm saying. People are like, "Oh, it's Florida." I'm like, "It's not Florida." I've watched Florida for the last 3 years. That's not Florida.
Well, but that's like the perception, right? That's what people are doing. Oh yeah, that's how Florida plays. Like, no, actually, it's not. Like, they don't go out there and they're not headhunting and they're not taking cheap shots while play is going on, and like,
or after the whistle, there's like a million scrums and a million penalties.
Yeah, that's the other thing is like, even with the Panthers, when you see things getting a little bit out of hand during the playoffs, it's not like these box-filled moments that we've had. Like, and even like, although respect to the Flyers and the Penguins, like I'm glad to see that in that series. But yeah, it's just interesting because, and I'm glad that you brought that up. I find it funny that the Panthers have become like the league's personification of like not cheap hockey or bully hockey or whatever you want to call it. And it just doesn't feel like they're not out there looking for it. They're not out there hurting people. They're not looking to fight. And it's just the way that kind of the games evolve. Like the Panthers are certainly one that they're never going to back down from a challenge. And when you've got guys like Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett that are certainly willing to toe that line, but it's just that it's a little different. And I'm glad that you said that, Jim. It's just a little bit not quite what the Panthers. And you wonder, because the way that I see Panthers and Lightning fans go at each other, I'm always like, man, they're just in each other's heads a little bit too much. And so it makes me wonder, maybe the players are in each other's heads a little bit. They've had some crazy matchups over the last few years. And now I wonder if Tampa is just like, they're a little too wound up a little too tight. Because to see, it didn't surprise me when I saw it was like Brandon Hagel in the penalty box with what's the thug that they brought up?
Saturn. Yep.
Like it's just like, it doesn't surprise me, but I feel like this is what the Panthers brought out of them. So to see it happening against Montreal was like, cool. great. I mean, I'm enjoying it. My popcorn is certainly getting used properly.
It's fantastic. It's been fantastic to watch.
Yeah. And I'm jealous, man. You got to go up there.
Not have to worry about how that's going to affect what you're saying.
No, I just enjoy it. But funny that you mentioned before, just because you got to go up there. Like I was talking to my co-host for my podcast, The Hockey Show, Roy Bellamy. Just we talk about like what our hockey bucket lists are and things that we want to do, before we're done, whether it's our careers or as fans. And for me, like mine had always been my number one playoff had always been I want to go to a playoff game at the Garden. That was always number one for me. And I got to do that when the Panthers played the Rangers in the Eastern Conference Final a couple of years ago. But now I'm thinking that list isn't satisfied. I need to go to Montreal. Like I've been to Toronto, and no,
not even close.
I like between what's happening in Montreal right now, what we saw happen there at Four Nations last year. Like that's a special place to watch dramatic special hockey, and I've got to make it there at some point and feel that because it must be just so cool.
It's chills. It's like a rock concert. It's unbelievable.
Hold on, Jim. Before you wrap, Dave, you brought up an interesting topic that I think we need to quickly delve into here. Like that hockey bucket list of whether it's in your career or in as a fan. Now. I really can't separate the two because I've been in this career too long, 10 years now. So I think we should each go around and say what our bucket list is in terms of something related to hockey in the NHL. We'll exclude like Olympics or international tournaments for a minute just because that's like a whole other like conversation. I'll get us started here. I've started, and this one the clock is ticking on. I've got to get out to Calgary and do the catwalk.
Next year. I'll see you out there.
Calgary Saddle Dome is closing down after next season, so never going to get that opportunity again. I was on the unofficial catwalks in San Jose my rookie year as a reporter, 16-17, when they didn't have enough seats in the normal press box, so they said, "Oh yeah, you're out there over the ice, on the catwalks in San Jose," and it's this flimsy walkway without like barriers to hold on to, and they put you on like this kindergarten type desk with the chair connected to it, and I'm just looking over and I'm just like, yeah, I'm just gonna die right here. But I thought I'd make it to the Calgary catwalk and do that. I'm not a huge fan of heights, but I will buck up and do it. You guys, what are your bucket list items?
I mean, I fulfilled one of mine, just playoffs in Montreal. It's just, something that I always wanted to do. I was like, all right, I'm going up. They're in. It's an easy drive from the area. Got to go. Got to see it. That one's for me. Catwalk's definitely up there. But I think, fulfill a hockey career. They've always say it's sweeter when your home team wins. The team you cover wins the Stanley Cup and you're part of that. Like, I know David's experienced it. I've talked to Dennis Bernstein about it. Like, experiencing the team you cover winning the Stanley Cup on home ice that's definitely up there.
Yeah, I can attest. And just it's funny what you said, Matthew, about how like you've been in this business for long enough that you feel like you can separate yourself. Like I don't know if I'm ever going to be in this business long enough that I won't feel like a fan impostoring as my job. Like I've just caught like permanent imposter syndrome that like, how am I doing this? I am standing here next to Brad Marchand and this is the coolest thing ever. And I have to pretend like it's totally normal and I'm not geeking out right now. And I don't know if I'm ever not going to have that feeling. So
there's a reason though why I can't separate it anymore, why I can only look at it through the prism of the career. So when I first started, I was an intern for Stan Fischler, and he had me primarily covering the Islanders, Rangers secondary, Devils tertiary for my responsibilities my rookie year. And at the time, the beat writers for those teams were all very veteran beat writers who were nowhere close to my age. I was 23 years old. I think the next youngest Ranger beat writer was like 50. The next youngest Islander beat writer, I think, was like 45. The Devils were a drop younger. It was like 40 or like 38, 40. So like, you always learn the rule, and you guys can test this. that, there's no cheering in the press box. That's the first rule that they teach you. And my first game at Madison Square Garden covering a Ranger game was against the Winnipeg Jets, and Jacob Trouba was, the rumors were swirling. There was a holdout about the contract and everything. And lo and behold, so I'm sitting there in the Sky Bridge, all the way to the left. Like, there's only 2 seats between me and the next fan section. And there were a number of fans there who I knew from my neighborhood. And I didn't know they were going to be at the game. But they see me and they start going, hey, it's Matt. And they start, derisively, chanting my name. And, I'm like, I don't know how to react here. And you can just see all the veteran writers sitting there looking like they just want to, toss me onto the ice and throw me over, no parachute, nothing. So, they're the reason why I can't separate that prism anymore. It's
yeah.
There's no fandom look at it. It's strictly career based.
No, that's for just I went going to hockey games as a media guy. I'm usually sitting next to Roy, my co-host, most of the times in the press box, and but now we control ourselves much more professionally. But our first couple of years in the press box, we contained ourselves above water, but below water where you can't see anything. That old analogy about the duck below, you don't see anything, but below you keep going. So we'd be underneath the press box punching each other in the leg to celebrate goals, and nobody could see it. And we're bruising each other's thighs up like crazy, yes. But that we had to keep it cool. So now it's, we saw them win a cup and we, celebrate a little bit, but it's a tough line to bridge. It's or line to toe. And hopefully I never get a dirty look for being too loud in the press box. But yeah, it's and just to get back to your bucket list question, we basically mentioned Montreal playoff game, the catwalk in Calgary, which hopefully we'll make it out there next season when the Panthers do. And the only other bucket list thing for me isn't necessarily an NHL thing. It's more of just a hockey thing. Even though I lived up north for a few years, I have not skated on a pond. And so that's 100% high on my bucket list. I need for sure. I just need to get up there in the winter with my skates, but I've got to make that happen at some point. I don't need to put my gear on. I don't need
no.
I'm good with that. I just want to go skate a little, maybe do a little stick handling or whatever, but I got to get out in the ice, on real ice, not pretend ice. So hopefully at some point that'll happen.
There's a great pond in Boston, actually. It's downtown. I want to say it's about 2 miles-ish from TD Garden. When I went up there for the first time to cover a game back in late 16-17, my dad and I, we found this frozen over pond that they put the rails up around it so that people could hold on to, if they weren't experienced in skating or anything. And it had frozen over enough. And yeah, you cannot be in hockey without at some point having to skate on a pond.
Totally.
Amen to that.
I got lucky. I got to, we were skating on the Winter Classic ice, and I've been on, NHL ice before, and that's awesome. It's amazing. But I look, I'm sure anybody who's been in hockey will tell you, no, you've got to skate on a pond. You've got to go and skate on a frozen piece of water. So yes, it'll happen. It'll happen at some point. If we can figure out, my friends and I have talked about looking for an Airbnb of somewhere in Minnesota where there's just a pond out back. You could rent the house, go skate for some experience like that. So it'll happen at some point.
Then if you want to have that experience, then when it's really cold, just go get a room at the Golden Arrow at Lake Placid. You got the pond out there. You can go skate. There you go. Straight. We hook you up.
Lake Placid. That's it. No. That's it.
Ottawa and skate down the
canal.
Yeah, I got to go to Lake Placid and visit the arena, the 1980 arena. That's also on my bucket list.
That's the spot. That's the spot to do it. But a lot of great bucket list items here, fellas. I like the question, like the round table on that, and everybody seems to have the same opinion on. I believe it was a goal in Anaheim on Sunday night.
Yes, and in Calgary.
Yeah, it definitely was a goal in Calgary.
That was a goal.
I'm just going to be controversial to be no, the 0-4, it was not a goal. Just so that we're not.
That's all right. Hey, we like to have fun here on the Blue Line Blast podcast. Again, we like to thank David Dwork, Hockey News, coming on, talks to Florida Panthers. We go around the league as well. Matthew Blittner is my co-host. Jim Biringer. Guys, take care and enjoy.